Hello, World Wide Web. I'm Dr. Shado, the internet personality with a drinking problem. A Stephen King drinking game drinking problem. Hey, if I can use the fact that Dr. Sleep is giving The Shining newfound relevance as an excuse to play the Stephen King drinking game on Live and Wired, at the very least I can also take the time to properly sit back, observe, and review Stanley Kubrick's The Shining while I'm at it. Without being completely fit-chased this time. I mean, I don't have to play the Stephen King drinking game every single time I watch a movie based on some of his work. I just usually do. But for the three of you out there out of the loop, what is Stanley Kubrick's The Shining? Well, it's a 1980 horror movie based on the Stephen King novel of the same name. A small family moves into a secluded hotel as caretakers, trapped inside for months due to the harsh Colorado weather. However, not only does the isolation lend its own brand of unease, but the dark history of the hotel comes back to haunt the family, and slowly but surely, insanity reigns. Or within the first 5 minutes. That's what you get for hiring Jack Nicholson as the lead. So, let's take a look at The Shining and see just how crazy things can get. We open up to landscapes. Not much happening, but the music sure thinks it's creepy. And remember, this is 1980. Drone footage wasn't really a thing then. This is state-of-the-art Steadicam footage taken from a helicopter. It makes you really appreciate the piloting skills. The camera is following the car down to the Overlook Hotel, where we see our lead, Jack Nicholson, playing the role of Jack Torrance, applying for the job of hotel caretaker. You see, the Overlook closes every winter, and they need someone here to make sure it stays in one piece during that time.
Do you mind if I ask why you do that? It seems to me that the skiing up here would be fantastic.
Yeah, but then we wouldn't have a movie. Or we would. Recreate Snow Beast starring Jack Nicholson as the Yeti. Stuart Ullman, played by Barry Nelson, explains that the Overlook was built for its scenic view, not accessibility. The local area is too sparsely populated, and the 20-some-odd miles of winding road to get up there would be ridiculously expensive to keep clear during the heavy snow seasons, so they just closed down for the winter. That also means whoever holds the job of caretaker must be able to deal with the crippling isolation.
Well, that just happens to be exactly what I'm looking for. I'm outlining a new writing project, and
of course, Stephen King's story, the main character is a writer. He's writing a play in the novel, and in this one he's writing... He's writing. He's a writer.
How about your wife and son? How do you think they'll take to it?
they'll love it.
As a general rule of thumb, none of my family really likes people socializing. It's enough of a nightmare trying to make it through dealing with the people on the other end of a drive-thru. So they're one big, happy, introverted family, but Ullman isn't done warning Jack of the dangers of isolation. You see, the Overlook has a dark history. One of the previous winter caretakers seemed like a nice guy, but while locked away from the rest of the world, something inside him must have snapped.
He ran amok and he killed his family with an axe.
Dude, spoiler alert! The story of death, depravity, and dismembering daughters doesn't deter the dude. In fact, he's sure his wife will find the tale more intriguing than terrifying. No plans to tell Danny, though, played by Danny Lloyd. Not that he needs telling.
Do you think Dad'll get the job? He already did. He's gonna phone Wendy up in a few minutes to tell her.
Danny's got his friend Tony to explain to him all of those relevant plot points. Now, in the book, Tony is explained in quite a lot of detail and clearly a friend, whereas in this movie he's more mysterious, except Danny does actually tell other people about him, but who knows how friendly he is. As Danny wonders why Tony doesn't want to go to the hotel, at first Tony doesn't explain why, but Danny insists on it. So nothing says friendly psychic spirit quite like horrifying visions of blood and gore as far as the eye can see. With a terrifying blood elevator and creepy little girl visions blasted into Danny's head. This results in a visit by the doctor, played by Ann Jackson. Danny says, no, there wasn't any weird odor or anything like that. Just the little voice that lives inside my mouth talking to me. You know, nothing out of the ordinary. Thus, she explains the situation to Wendy, played by Shelley Duvall. You see, this Well, who knows what caused it, but it probably isn't going to happen again anyway.
They're more akin to auto-hypnosis, a kind of self-induced trance.
Yeah, don't worry about it, kid just hypnotized himself into a blackout. Happens all the time. But that whole imaginary friend thing is intriguing to the good doctor, so Wendy explains that she first noticed it back when they had to take Danny out of school due to an injury. An injury caused when Danny was a little messy, and his father reacted by nearly tearing the boy's arm out of his socket. He was drunk that night.
Something good did come out of it all because he said, Wendy, I'm never going to touch another drop.
Of course, he did pick up black tar heroin, but hey, no booze. I'm so proud of him. No bother. The doctor never comes up again. The Torrance family is moving in, with a little road trip story about the Donner Party, because everything is scarier when you involve cannibalism. While Jack works on getting up to speed with the higher-ups at the hotel, Denny is off enjoying himself in the game room. Yeah, little kids just love darts. However... the spooky, spooky girls have arrived, who are not twins but are dressed exactly the same. And played by twins, Lisa and Louise Burns. They still aren't really all that important yet, though, so they just leave. No bother, Ullman continues giving Jack and Wendy the 5-cent tour, pointing out all the little areas that are going to become very important come the climax.
This is our famous hedge maze. It's quite an attraction around here.
Used to have all kinds of little hedge animals that were going to come alive and scare the crap out of you, but this is only 1980 and we needed the budget for film. Lots of film, enough film to encase the entirety of Jupiter. And just in case of emergency, they have a snowcat. Pretty much a snowmobile made by Hummer. There's also the ballroom and bar, though it's a bit lacking in one particular area.
We always remove all the booze from the premises when we shut down. That reduces the insurance we normally have to carry.
Yeah, I guess locking a family up in a hotel for several months with nothing to do but stare at the snow or get completely fucking hammered might lead to some issues. But we also have new important characters to introduce, such as Dick, played by Benjamin Sherman Crothers, aka Scatman Crothers.
Dick, if you're ready to do it now, I think it'd be a good idea if you could show Mrs. Torrance the kitchen while I continue on with Jack.
While Crothers is notable for his vocal talent and playing jazz in the original Transformers series, here he's a cook, though that just leaves me slightly concerned as to what exactly Scatman has in that crock pot. No bother, it's a big friggin' hotel, so the kitchen has just about everything you'd need to feed hundreds and hundreds of people every day. And while the booze has been moved off-site, the walk-in freezer remains along with mountains and mountains of frozen carcasses. That's not what caught Wendy's attention, though.
How'd you know we call him Doc?
Beg pardon?
Doc. You called Danny Doc twice just now.
I did?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's a very common nickname, but it's our common nickname. You got it? Dick. Wendy thinks this is super weird, but forgets about it soon enough. He says Danny looks like a doc, and that's that. However, when he's showing her all the canned foods they have in the pantry...
How'd you like some ice cream, Doc?
Oh my god, he's the killer! He's using his psychic powers to kill everyone! Through poor dietary decisions. Well, he's playing the long game. Nah, the killer Dick was an alternate ending that never panned out. Instead, he uses the promise of ice cream in order to get alone with Danny, but not for nefarious purposes. You see, the scat chef here has sensed a latent gift in Danny. A gift he himself has, just as his grandmother before him.
My grandmother and I could hold conversations entirely without ever opening our mouths.
The amazing power of American Sign Language.
She called it shining.
Oh, I get it, like walkers, or the infected, or the turned. You just can't call a zombie, and I guess now you just can't call a psychic either. But The Shining is more of a catch-all term for anything supernatural, I guess, as the topic soon shifts from Danny and his bodiless friend Tony, and back to the Overlook Hotel, and what makes it so special.
You know, some places are like people. Some shine and some don't.
It's amazing what you can do with little scrubbing bubbles. But as it turns out, only people like them with the shining can detect the shining of a shiny, shining place that shines. Danny, however, wants to know about a certain room Tony has told him about.
What is in room 237?
Nothing.
Yeah, kid, it's room 217 in the book. And there's so much nothing in there, Dick tells him to never go looking! Okay then, Kubrick. Well, I guess if you're going to do 100 takes of someone tying their shoes, you really can't be arsed to spend 1 or 2 decades to film a montage. Watching their day-to-day lives can't be all that interesting. Danny tears through the labyrinthian hallways on his tricycle, likely marking up the hardwood floor something fierce, while Wendy prepares a delicious breakfast for her husband, who is still in bed quite late, but it's no bother. She loves him, Danny loves his tricycle, and Jack loves the Overlook Hotel.
When I came up here for my interview, it was as though I'd been here before.
Now, Stephen King wasn't exactly a big fan of that interview scene. He says that Jack seemed like he was crazy long before he even got to the Overlook Hotel. Though, technically speaking, he was supposedly drawn to the Overlook Hotel through something in his subconscious, which doesn't exactly sound like the picture of sanity to me, but oh well. But now that he's here, he can finally work on his writing, which he is clearly not doing. Instead, Jack seems to be playing with his balls. No bother, Wendy and Danny can also enjoy their time at the Overlook, running and playing in the insanely large hedge maze. It can't be too easy to get lost in. They have a mini-map of the thing just inside the hotel. And while there are hints at the supernatural and spooky stuff in the first hour of the film, it really comes down to the music to drive that home. Yeah, I have no idea how in the hell he's seeing that, but it's the dreamlike chimes that fill you with a sense of unease. Moving on, it seems that a massive snowstorm is set to hit the area, but that's not the thing to worry ourselves over right now. Danny has found the infamous Room 237. What secrets lie inside the door of the room that he was told in no uncertain terms to never ever enter? Damn, locked! Well, I'm coming back as soon as I'm old enough to get a credit card. Ah well, Wendy can take her knowledge of the forecast over to Jack and strike up a conversation about the weather. Unfortunately, he's not feeling much like dealing with idle chatter.
Don't be so grouchy.
I'm not being grouchy. I just want to finish my work.
I love this scene personally. It reminds me a lot of when me and my fiancé butt heads while I'm trying to script.
Whenever you come in here and interrupt me, you're breaking my concentration. You're distracting me. And it will then take me time to get back to where I was.
I mean the beginning. It starts that way. Moving on. The gist of his argument is that this is his working room, she knows this, so don't bother me while I'm working! Stay out! Sheepishly, Wendy nods in agreement.
Why don't you start right now and get the fuck out of here?
Okay.
Revealing more of Jack's dark side, directed at the demure, submissive Wendy, who Stephen King also really did not like. That's not how he wrote her. She's supposed to be like this tall, blonde, real go-getter with a take-no-prisoners attitude, who just so happened to stick around in a relationship with an abusive drunk because otherwise the story wouldn't happen. Following this, a lot of time passes, but not so much in terms of action. Wendy and Danny play in the snow while Jack stares onward like the edibles just kicked in. Moving on, Wendy radios up the U.S. Forest Service who establish, yes, it's snowing and the phone lines could be affected, so keep the radio on in the meantime. Also, Danny sees the twins again. Bloody and dead! Murdered with an axe! No bother, Tony tells him it's not real anyway, so we can move on to Jack being even scarier.
I wish we could stay here forever. Ever.
Jesus, I don't even feel that way about normal, definitely not haunted real estate. While Jack slowly descends into madness, life goes on. However, as Danny is out playing in the hallway, a ball approaches him. This mysterious spherical object appears to have originated from the Forbidden Room. The spooky land of spooky secrets. So secret, in fact, we don't even see what's in it yet. Instead, Wendy, doing actual maintenance work, is distracted by the terrified screams of Jack. He's having a nightmare. A nightmare he readily explains to Wendy. Seems he dreamed about killing her and Danny, cutting them up, that kind of psychotic shit. Before she can process this, though, Danny enters the room. He's not talking, but the tears in his clothes and marks on his body tell Wendy everything she needs to know.
You did this to him, didn't you? You son of a bitch! You did this to him!
In her defense, process of elimination, Kinda easy to put the blame on Jack. With his son hurt and his wife accusing him of the deed, Jack seeks solitude. More so than he's been having so far. In heading to the ballroom, taking a seat at the bar, he makes an observation.
A little slow tonight, isn't it?
Yes, it is, Mr. Torrance.
Introducing Lloyd, played by Joe Turkel, a bartender who brings new meaning to the term distilled spirits. Now, pretty well off the deep end, Jack indulges in imaginary alcohol, while bemoaning his wife never letting him live down the fact that he maybe at one point kinda sorta almost yanked Danny's arm clean off. However, he's in the clear as Wendy rushes in to tell him that there is in fact a crazy woman in the hotel. She's off in one of the rooms Danny went in, and she's who hurt him.
Are you out of your fucking mind?
Well, let's be real, Wendy. The crazy husband theory is still winning out over mysterious, insane woman who's been living in the hotel who you just haven't noticed in over a month. I mean, the explanation is supernatural at heart, but that just means that Dick gets a funny feeling and knows in his heart of hearts that Danny has entered room 237, just as Jack does, discovering a handy-dandy naked lady. Unfortunately for him, it turns out to actually be a horrifyingly decomposing naked lady. That's a hell of a howdy-do. So, returning to Wendy, he tells her, no, completely fine. Nothing at all in the room. Of course, this doesn't explain exactly who hurt Danny.
I think he did it to himself.
Those darn kids playing Stop Hitting Yourself doesn't really work as a single-player game.
Once you rule out his version of what happened, there is no other explanation.
No, there's still a whole daddy beat 'em up angle. I mean, maybe Jack's been trying on Wendy's clothes while off screen, I don't know. Wendy figures things are just getting out of hand, and the best thing to do is pack up and get out of here for a while. That obviously doesn't sit well with Jack, who berates Wendy for creating problems when he's finally getting some real work done on his writing. Heading back to the ballroom, it looks like Jack's imaginary friends have invited even more imaginary friends over, leading him to run to even more specters, such as Grady, played by Philip Stone.
You, chopped your wife and daughter up into little bits. And, then you blew your brains out.
Daughters, Jack? I didn't get all of those meaty chunks out of just one of them. However, Grady says that he's not the caretaker. Jack is the caretaker. Jack has always been the caretaker. Also, the Overlook Hotel is love, it is life, and Grady's family might have shown some signs that they were unhappy here, but all he did was correct that. Also, hey, just so you know, your kid's psychically contacting the cook to come in or screw things up for you. Just so you know. And yes, Dick is heeding the call and heading down there at once. Not that Wendy is just waiting for rescue. She's still not happy here and intends to go tell Jack that she's going to take Danny and leave. However, when she goes into his workroom, he is nowhere to be seen, allowing her to examine just what he has been writing for the last several weeks. Music is telling us this is super terrifying, but let's be honest here, that would easily be a New York Times bestseller.
How do you like it?
Nice direction, but seriously, hire a proofreader. I mean, all work and no play makes Jack a dull bot. Don't know if you noticed it by now, but yeah, Jack's crazy, completely off his rocker, taunting and berating Wendy as she slowly backs away from him. Eventually, he starts laughing and telling her all about how he's going to bash her brains in.
Give me the bat.
Not taking into account the small detail that she was the one who was armed. Meaning he is knocked the fuck out, allowing her to drag his ass all the way down to the pantry and lock him up with no way to escape. Still plenty of food, so that's nice of her. However, her plans to leave with Danny and return with a doctor just caused Jack to break out into fits of laughter, telling her she's in for one hell of a surprise.
Go check out the snowcat in the radio and you'll see what I mean.
Okay, is this just some elaborate setup for an anniversary gift? I mean, it's how I would do it. Nope, the radio has been sabotaged, as well as the snowcat. Thus, Wendy and Danny are trapped there, with no way to contact the outside world. Well, that sucks and all, but hell, Jack's still locked up tight, having little chats with the disembodied voice of Mr. Grady about how sure he messed up once, but he can take care of the Overlook just fine. Just need to murder that family and all. This leads to Danny's famous warning, repeated over and over again.
Red rum! Red rum! Red rum! Red rum! Red rum! Red rum! Stop it! Red rum!
Stop it, Danny! You sound like some YouTuber who's trying desperately to stay monetized. The mirror lets us know right quick that means murder! Because Daddy's home, and he's ready to correct the fuck out of them! Trying to escape, Wendy heads into the bathroom, but the window doesn't open very far, and she can only manage to squeeze Danny out, while having to face off against Jack herself.
Here's Johnny!
Possibly the most famous line associated with The Shining. Also, not in the book. Ad-libs. However, when he goes for the lock, Wendy cuts his hand, causing him to reel away in pain, and giving enough time for him to hear a snowcat approaching. It turns out this was Dick. Heeding The Shining, he felt that there was danger lurking here, returning to check on Danny. But for one reason or another, being psychic and able to detect when danger is about to happen, it only really works when the plot says so. So Dick is dead, Danny dashes away from Daddy, and through this door we have a dude dressed like a dog doing another dude. Okay. Well, after Danny escaped out the window only to run back into the hotel, he ran back outside and into the hedge maze, with his father trailing behind him, slowed by all those injuries he suffered at the hands of Wendy. Danny easily slips away and then uses his lead to carefully walk back over his own footprints before slipping away and covering his tracks. This means he can escape out of the maze and flee the hotel with Wendy driving Dick's snowcat. Jack, on the other hand, is lost in the maze, desperately searching for a family member to kill. Only to succumb to the elements. Well, technically speaking, temperature isn't really an element. At least not if we're going by the periodic table here. Anyway, the end! Wendy and Danny escaped while Jack died at the hotel, much like he did before, way back in the 1920s. Ooh, this place is haunted by me! It's gotta be awkward. Anyway, that was Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. And yeah, it's got its flaws, but it's still pretty easy to see why it is considered to be one of the highest rated horror movies of all time. As a whole, the movie is almost eye candy on the same level as Suspiria, with the visual spectacle coming from extremely artistic architecture as much as smart angles in a natural setting. Also, with such a minuscule cast over a 2.5-hour running time, there's really not a lot of action moving things forward. However, the film makes up for that with a deliberately slow burn and, of course, boatloads of creepy music. Without the soundtrack, The Shining would feel far less creepy and a whole lot more dull, as things take quite a while to get going and really don't involve much in terms of things occurring physically. It's mostly psychological. That being said, there are common criticisms leveled at this movie, mostly from Stephen King, that I find a bit confusing. Yeah, Jack isn't the most stable-looking individual at the beginning, but I think it's quite a stretch to suggest he didn't get significantly crazier as the movie progresses. Mostly, though, I take issue with how he thinks the character of Wendy was misogynistic. Yeah, she was originally written to be stronger, tougher, and far more boring, but I don't think that takes away from Shelley's performance. If anything, I think the idea of Wendy being a more submissive woman makes sense if she's supposed to be staying with a guy like Jack, and moving off in the middle of nowhere with him like there's nothing else she'd rather be doing. Not to mention that Wendy has plenty of agency in The Shining. She doesn't just sit there and take it when Jack turns. She's completely out of her element, but she fights back and wins. The injuries he suffers from her are the things that hamper him for the rest of the movie. If not for Wendy's actions, Danny would be dead and the movie would be far more depressing. Overall, The Shining is not one of the absolute best horror movies ever made in my opinion, but it's still a damn fine movie. The direction is sharp enough that for a critic like me, even the slow parts are entertaining just to watch, and when the horror does come, it feels more tense as a result. It still has issues here and there, but nothing to bring it down any further than 4 absolutely massive cans of fruit cocktail out of 5. Now, if only I actually knew what brand of rum out there came in red. It's been bothering me for years. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I've been Dr. Shado. And remember, avoid room 237 at all costs! Seriously, you could edit that completely out of the movie and it wouldn't really change that much.
Are you out of your fucking mind?